So for letter C, I'm going to go and draw the line. Remember that I want to be able to leave that whatever is being squared by itself first before I get rid of the square root. Do not multiply 4 times x and 4 times 1. You can because of the square. So I'm going to divide by 4. Divide by 4. That will cancel the 4. So I have x plus 1 squared is equal to 25. Now I can take the square root on both sides. The square root and the square cancel, so we have x plus 1 is equal to 5, and don't forget your plus or minus. Then I can get rid of the 1 by moving it to the right hand side. So that'll give me x is equal to negative 1, that's a positive because it's a negative, plus or minus 5. Because this is a whole number, a nice square root, I can separate the same thing that I did here. So I'm going to separate into two values. It will be negative 1 plus 5, and then negative 1 minus 5. So the plus and minus, one of them plus, the other one minus. So from there, negative 1 plus 5 will give me 4. Negative 1 minus 5 will give me negative 6. For the next problem, it will be the same process. I'm going to go and draw the line. I'm going to move my 3 to the right. It's going to become a negative 3. Remember, I want to be able to leave the x minus 5 square by itself before I can get rid of the square. So that gives me negative 2. X minus 5 squared is equal to negative 72. Now I can divide by negative 2 to get rid of this. To get rid of it. Now x minus 5 squared is equal to negative and negative is going to be a positive, so it gives me positive 36. I can square root on both sides. That will cancel. So x minus 5 is equal to square root of 36 will give me plus or minus 6. And I'm going to move the 5 to the right, becomes a positive. So x is equal to 5 plus or minus 6. So x is equal to 5 plus or minus 6. That gives me two solutions. 5 plus 6, one with the positive, and 5 minus 6 is 6 with the negative. That gives me 11, and that gives me negative 1. Now let's continue to the back side. On the back side, we are also going to be dealing with negative numbers inside the square root. Now we have a property that says that if we have a negative number, we can take it out as an imaginary number, and we're going to be covering imaginary numbers on Fridays in more depth. Square root of r. So for example, the square root of negative 3 is going to be I. So the negative is going to be taken out as an I, and then the square root of 3. Basically, we have the property that the square root of negative 1 is going to be an I. Every time you have a negative value inside the square root, that's going to come out as an imaginary number and the square root of 3. So let's go and cover example number 4. I'm going to go and draw the line, same process as before. I want to be able to leave the x squared by itself, so I'm going to move the 9 to the right, becomes a negative 9. That gives me 2x squared is equal to negative 50. So now I move the negative 9 to the right, becomes the positive 9 to the right becomes a negative 50. This comes down. Now I'm going to divide by 2. Divide by 2. That cancels. So we have x squared is equal to negative 50. I'm going to take the square root on both sides. The square root and the square cancel, so I have x is equal to, the square of 50 will be I outside because there's a negative. Now I can separate it as the square of 25 times the square of 2. And we know that the square of 25 is going to be 5. But let's not forget the plus or minus. So x is equal to plus or minus square of, this will be 5. We don't write down I5, we write down 5i. Remember the I came from here because it was a negative square root. Square of 25 is 5, and then the square of 2. And this will be your final answer. Let's go through letter B. We're going to draw the line. I want to be able to leave whatever's been squared by itself. So I'm going to move the 1 to the right, becomes a negative 1. That gives me 9. 4x minus 4 squared is equal to negative 72. I'm going to divide by 9 to cancel it. We have 4x minus 4 is equal to negative 8. Well, let's not forget my square. Now I can get rid of the square. I'm going to take the square root on both sides. The square root and the square cancel, so we just have 4x minus 4 is equal to, now the square of 8, of negative 8, we know there's a negative inside, so the first plus or minus, the negative inside will come out as an I, and I'm going to separate the square of 8. You can do the factor tree if you want, or we can separate the square of 4 times the square of 2. The square of 4 will be 2, so it's 4x minus 4 is equal to plus or minus, this will give me a 2, so it'll be 2i square root of 2. The square root of 2 remains the same. Now I'm going to move the 4 to the right, becomes a positive, and I'm going to cheat, I need some more space. So that's going to become a positive, so that will give me 4x is equal to 4 plus or minus 2i square root of 2. Now I'm going to divide by 4. Now when I divide by 4, I'm going to divide each of them by 4, just like we've done before. That will cancel, so x is equal to, gives me 1. Now be careful, when you reduce, you cannot reduce whatever's inside the square root. We can only reduce the 2 and the 4. So I can divide by 2. So it gives me plus or minus 1i square root of 2 and divide by 2 over 2. And this will be your final answer. Just remember that whenever you divide by 4, you divide each one by 4. And to be careful when you reduce, do not reduce this square root of 2. You just reduce that 2 and the 4 as a fraction, so it gives you 1 over 2. So let's continue with the next example. Letter B. Letter C. We'll try to see if you guys can do it by yourselves, and then we can check your answers. So for letter C, we're going to go through the same process. We are going to draw the line. I want to be able to leave whatever's being squared by itself. So we want to be able to leave the x plus 5 squared by itself. So we're going to divide by negative 6. We have x plus 5 squared is equal to negative 20. Now I can take the square root on both sides. The square root and the square cancel, so I have x plus 5 is equal to the square of 20. I notice there's a negative inside, so I'll be an I. Because I took the square root on both sides, it will be plus or minus. I can separate the square of 20 as the square of 4 times the square of 5. We have x plus 5 is equal to, now the square of 4 is going to be 2. That gives me plus or minus 2i. Notice that I wrote it down first and then the I, and then square root of 5. Last step is to be able to move the 2 to the right, becomes a negative. be x is equal to negative 5 plus or minus 2I square root of 5. And letter D, we're going to go through the same process. Draw the line. I'm going to go ahead and move my 1 to the right, becomes a negative. So I have 3x squared is equal to negative 1, negative 80, minus 1 will give me 3x squared is equal to negative 81. I'm going to divide by 3 on both sides. That will cancel. So I have x squared is equal to negative 27. And now I can get rid of the square by taking the square root on both sides. The square root and the square cancel. So I have x is equal to, because I took the square root on both sides, don't forget your plus or minus. I have a negative inside, so it'll be an I. The square of 27 will be the square of 9 times square of 3. The square of 9 will be 3, so it'll be plus or minus 3I and then square of 3. Now remember, if you want to do your factor tree for the 27, you'll end up with the same answer. Go and try your objective met. I'll give you guys a minute or two, and then we can compare answers. Now for the objective met, same process. We're going to draw the line. I'm going to divide by negative 3 to cancel it. So we have x minus 4 squared is equal to 8. I'm going to take the square root on both sides to cancel the square. We have x minus 4 is equal to, remember that every time that you have the square, you take the square root on both sides, we're going to have plus or minus. Now the square of 8, it will be the square root of 4 times the square root of 2. I must simplify that as a 2. So we have x minus 4 is equal to plus or minus 2 square root of 2. And then the last step, I'm going to move my 2 to the right, becomes a positive. I have x is equal to 4 plus or minus 2 square root of 2. And remember that because we have a square root here, we don't need to separate like we did on example number 3. This will be your final answer. For letter B, I'm going to go and draw the line. Move the 7 to the right, becomes a negative 7. So we have 2x squared is equal to negative 24. I'm going to divide by 2. That will cancel. X squared is equal to negative 12. I'm going to take the square root on both sides. The square root and the square cancels. We have x is equal to, since I have a negative, it's going to be an I outside. Don't forget your plus or minus. I'm going to rewrite this as the square root of 4 times the square root of 3. That gives me square root of 12. And the square root of 4 will be 2. So plus or minus. Don't forget, you don't write down I2. It will be 2I and then the square root of 3. And that'll be your final answer. Thank you so much. Have a great day and be productive. Thanks.